Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Hey everybody, welcome to the Cookbook. I'm so glad that you could join us today. I'm super excited about our guest today, and I know that I say that about all of our guests, but it's the truth. I'm just excited about all of them. But today I'm super excited because Scott's my friend. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Scott. So Scott Spann, MSOD, CSM, ACC, is CEO of Tolero Solutions. As a people strategist, leadership coach, and change and transformation specialist, his work is focused on people. Through his consulting and training work, he supports clients to survive and thrive through change and transition and create people-focused cultures and a great employee experience. Through his coaching work, he supports people willing to dig deeper to identify and overcome what's holding them back, change behaviors, accelerate performance, and achieve their goals. Told you he's awesome. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Scott Spann.
Well, that is a tough intro to add anything to, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, you know, when I looked at your first bio, there was like so much stuff, and I figured we would just kind of go through all of that while we're talking as we go squirrel and we get, distracted by other things.
Neurodivergent moment. Yes. Yes.
So how are you today?
I am good. It is spring, which is my favorite time of year, actually, speaking of squirrel. Except when those actually happen to be outside with the dog jumping at the window trying to kill them. But other than that, today is a good day. Yes.
Well, there you go.
How are you? Looks sunny where you're at.
It is really sunny where I'm at. And it's finally warming up. It was really, really hot. And then it got cold. And now it's warming up again. And as you know, poor Skylar has been in a cone for 3 weeks now. So she can't run after squirrels. She can't do anything because the cone is kind of like dragging her head down.
Poor baby. Yes.
I feel so bad for her. But so on some of the things that we didn't touch in your bio that, that I was reading, you've co-authored a book. There's so much that you've done. We didn't talk about your government clearance, which I think is cool. Yeah. And well, but
that's DC. That's just DC.
Well, yes, but see, now people don't know where you are. So he is in Virginia, which is, for those of you who don't know, not too far from DC. So tell us a little bit about what you do a little bit more about
what I do. The bio wasn't enough. So yes. So, combination of things. So as you said, on the consulting and advisory side of things, I'm primarily focused on change management and culture and employee experience. So all of that people stuff, right? So, when you go to work basically and you realize I hate it here, then they usually call me to try and fix it or help fix it anyway. At least those organizations that really care about people and don't give lip service. And then the other piece of that around change and transformation is working with leaders to help them adapt to changes in the workplace, which, like great resignation right now, like things have been insanely crazy for everybody. Yeah. So helping them personally adapt to change and transition for their organization and their teams, and then also for themselves too, which is the other piece of work that I focus on when I do leadership and executive coaching as well, which is that whole piece that you read about working with folks that are willing to dig deeper to help uncover, ways to actually improve and, for them to achieve the results that they want to get out of both professional and personal lives.
Right. And it's funny because, a friend of mine from years ago that I haven't spoken to or seen in a while, I was on LinkedIn and he did this post about starting, his own gig because where he was, they didn't appreciate him. So we took the conversation into a DM, and I said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you've now become a statistic. You are now part of the Great Resignation. And people, even Skylar agrees. And people are, people are leaving their jobs in droves because they're not appreciated. They don't get the recognition. They're hired to do a job and then they're not allowed to do the job that they're hired for.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah.
Isn't that awesome? It's like, hey, we want you to be the marketing
Yeah.
director. Hey, but don't do marketing.
Or do it this way and only do it this way, even though we hired you to help improve it by bringing the skill sets that you have from other places. But hey.
Exactly. But we're going to tell you how to do it. So then why the hell did you hire me, right?
That's a biggie.
It's kind of mind-boggling. So, but in your field, you must see a shit ton of this, like where people are just going, so how do you guide?
Are you saying hi now? No, excuse me. We have a puppy intrusion.
I see that. How do you?
That's right. You know I'm all about authenticity, so the dog can say hi.
For those of you listening and watching, Scott and I both have like ADHD, so this is probably going to be a shit show. I'm just going to let you know.
That and
between the dogs and everything else.
Social dogs, yes.
Yes, the dogs for sure. But how do you guide people? I mean, we're in such a spot when it comes to employment that, and that's what this podcast is for. I know you hate that word, but that's what this is for up and coming entrepreneurs, people who are thinking of leaving their jobs, and existing, entrepreneurs and CEOs, seasoned. But one of the things that we're really looking at now is people are really unhappy at work. So when they come to you for that, how do you guide them?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the people and the context, right? So if you're talking organizational and dealing with teams or dealing with leaders, that's a little bit different of a situation on the consulting side. Whereas if actual individual is coming to me and saying, how do I deal with this? Or should I make a transition? Or how do I make a transition? Or my hair is on fire, I don't know what to do kind of thing. Then that's more on the coaching side of things. So it's slightly different. Also, too, the coaching side is really guidance and support.
Well, that's what I mean for the individual, not that we'll get into the leadership piece in a little bit.
Because that's different, right? I mean, from a consulting perspective, on that side, I'm paid to find the improvements, bring them solutions, tell them what to do and how to quote fix it, right? Like you could just wave some magic wand. But on the in the coaching side of things, that's truly helping the individual to uncover what's going on for them, and then guiding them to come up with their own solutions and maximize their own potential. So it's a little bit different. But I think current climate, to your question, the coaching side of things, a little bit more, I don't want to say relevant, but has been a little bit deeper of the work these days. And it's been interesting in that regard because me guiding people, it's me uncovering things and helping people to uncover things and raise their own awareness, even around this issue of the Great Resignation and transition. It's not me guiding them or putting them in a direction kind of thing, or you're telling them what to do. Now, with that said, I will say there's a theme around the folks I've been coaching lately in regards to either career transition or I'll say employee experience. They just say, I hate it here, which has been, many of them are just overwhelmed right now with the statistics and, with their peers and colleagues, maybe just running out the door in an organization. And they're like, it's kind of like buying real estate in a hot market, right? It's like, oh, I got to do it now. I got to do it now too. But they don't really stop to think about their reasoning for wanting to jump ship or their reasoning for wanting to make a transition, separate from sometimes the carrot and the stick that someone hangs in front of their face, which is usually monetary, from an employer perspective. And it's been an interesting theme for folks because what's really come up across the board is it's a values alignment or a values misalignment. And many of the folks I'm coaching now around this particular topic, they haven't evaluated or defined what their values are in years, if at all.
Right.
Right. And life happens. Right.
And we don't think about that, though. Like when when I was in the working world, I wasn't thinking,
what is this? This is not working.
No, well, you know what I mean. I mean, when I was working for like corporate or whatever, I didn't join a company and look at their values. Like that never even crossed my mind. I was looking for a job and I was looking, to see if we were a good fit, but I never looked at it from, their ethics and their values. And, it's a whole different world now. Now it's where you're interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing you.
Oh, totally.
You want to make sure that it is a good marriage for it. So
yeah. And I mean, and that's culture, right? People say culture. You hear it. It's like this giant buzzword, workplace culture. And different views on it. However, in today's market, it's even more and more important. And to your point, I mean, you have to first define what your values are, and then you have to take a look at the organization and the organization's culture, and specifically even the people you'll be working with, the leaders you'll be working with, and say, okay, so does this culture, do the values they have within the organization with their team align with mine? Because if not, then you're usually, and this has been coming up with coaching clients too, you're usually going to end up with a rub. There's going to be some kind of disconnect there.
Right. So why did you leave corporate? Like, what was your, like,
Yeah, I'm just laughing because, like, I get that question a lot, and people think that I'm older than I am, which these days is fine. I'll take it. In some instances, as long as they're like, you don't look it, that's okay. But I mean,
it's our genes, because
I'll take it. It's all good. But for me, that was part of the reason too, right? Because generationally, I'm a cusper, and I do generational differences work and generational diversity work as well. So for me, and technically I'm an XY cusp, by the way. I was getting a little bit frustrated with the fact that I was gaining new education, new skills and experience that I wanted to apply that could add value to a company and more so benefit clients of the actual company. And yet the business was basically saying, no, this is our approach. This is our model. This is what we do. So do it our way, kind of thing. And I have never been, I've never been, hammer and nail approach to things, just like square peg, round hole, right? So, for me, I have a toolkit of things that I like to pull from, situationally dependent on how I can help an individual or organization. And when I'm not able to do that, I get extremely frustrated about it. And when I found that happening, I was like, no, there's a better way to do this. And that was 2008 at the time when I started Tolero. And wasn't sure where I was going to go. At the time, I just knew that I couldn't make a difference the way that I wanted to make a difference and apply these skills that I know were of value to people. So I had some opportunities come my way, and I said, okay, let's try this whole entrepreneur thing, and see where it goes. And separate from just feeling like I was being forced to do certain things in a certain way. Right. So now I work with clients about how to, how do you value, appreciate, and respect your workforce and have a good employee experience? Well, because I was on the flip side of it, which is why I left corporate America.
Right.
That's the short version. Right. And then the other piece, quite honestly, is flexibility. Before work from home became what it is nowadays because of COVID, flexibility, you used to get a lot of pushback from folks, from businesses around that. And I said, no. I had family stuff going on at the time too. And I said, I need my flexibility. Mm-hmm. So being able to make a difference, add value, square peg, round hole, not feeling like square peg, round hole. Flexibility, kind of control of own destiny. That's really pretty much the high level as to why I left the corporate world. But now I serve the corporate world, among others. So it's kind of interesting, being on the other side of the fence.
Being on the other side. And it's funny because I remember, you talk about flexibility. I was working from home before working from home was cool. I mean, in a job that I had in, a former life, I got, because I traveled a bunch, I got to work from home a bunch. And it was, I remember the first 6 months where I was traveling, and then I wouldn't go into the office and I would go home, and like Blackberries were coming out and all this stuff. And so I had my first Blackberry and, whatever. It became this, this discipline that, oh crap, like I'm not going into the office. I have to like work from here. So I can't just get up at 10 o'clock and do whatever, people are going to be sending me emails at 8:30, 9 o'clock when I'm supposed to start. And I remember it was this whole discipline thing. And so now, with where everything has turned, I mean, I can't remember the last time, I didn't, or that I worked in an office. I've been working from home for it just seems like forever now. But
do you miss it? Do you miss the office environment?
And I was going to ask you that.
I ask, it's funny because I've been having that converation, a lot lately.
Yeah, I do miss having more people around, because right now I have, this girl and, the poor old guy in his office / bathroom. But yeah, I miss having more people around and being able to, kind of bullshit a little bit, and also, go out after work and do stuff like that. So that part I don't miss the other stuff. I don't miss the
Right.
being told how to do, what to do, when to do it. I remember I was in newspaper advertising sales a while ago.
I don't know if I ever told you that. That's what my husband's father did for years.
Oh, okay.
Newspaper advertising. Yep.
So
and layout and design and all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah.
No, I have somebody who's getting cranky here. We may have to pause this for a second, but so stop. But they were like, you have to sell this. You have to go out and sell this, and it didn't matter whether the client needed it. They wanted to go out and make these sales, and I remember going, no. And so this one client that I had that was in entertainment, I remember I walked in, and another friend of mine who worked in the healthcare system here. It happened twice. I walked in, I sat down in their office, and I held the thing up that had the sales. That boom, here it is. Closed it, and I said, "Okay, now you saw it." And she's like, "What was that?" I said, "I'm supposed to show you this, but you have no business being in this, so I'm not even going to sell it to you." And half the time they were like, well, let me just throw an ad in there anyway to help you. And I'm like, no, don't spend your money to help me. I want you to spend your money to where you're going to get, more bang for your buck.
That's a values alignment. Yeah.
100%. So that was, one of the first things for me that made me go, maybe this isn't right for me. And then I went to work for another newspaper. And that was almost worse. But at the end of the day, when it came time for something to happen that I was told was going to happen, it was like, oh, I just said that to bring you on board. What?
That's the bait and switch, right?
It was, and I've never had that happen to me before, and I didn't know what to do, and I don't have a good poker face. And I was like, what? Like, you what? And I went, okay. And then, 3 months later, my position was no longer needed because they knew I was looking for another job.
Different times. Isn't it interesting, though? Different times, but how much has not changed, right? From an organizational perspective in that regard. Yeah.
And I think that's why what you're doing as far as, coaching leaders on how to be a good leader and how not to be an asshole and not to do the bait and switch and to actually care about your employee, with that empathy thing that we've been talking about since January 1, right?
Yeah. And the empathy one, I mean, you know my thoughts on empathy. That's huge. And asshole leaders exist everywhere, right? What I have found, though, is some know they're assholes and some don't know they're assholes, and some know they're assholes and they care, and some know they're assholes and they just don't care.
They don't care.
So, working with the ones that know or don't know but care, or know and care, I should say, those two categories, that's always interesting because I feel I can make headway, more so they can when I'm working with them, and cause positive change. And those type of leaders I also enjoy working with because of the fact that, the asshole piece doesn't bother me, right? It's the New York thing we got, that we can handle that. But it's also, I refer to them as boomerang leaders or ripple effect leaders, right? Because once they get that awareness and they get that aha and they're willing to take the feedback and make some changes, then they take those changes back to their team or back to the organization, and you have a ripple effect, right? And you have improvement for everybody else as well. But first they have to have the awareness, and then they have to be willing to dig deeper and do the work. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's really interesting to see the differences. Yeah. I've walked away from some too. I mean, there's some that, stayed in that category of, I just don't care. It's like, thanks for calling me out on what I already knew, but I didn't want to deal with. And I'm like, well, you're nailing the fact you don't want to deal with it. So, goodbye and good luck. But P.S., your team should call me because they're going to need it. Which is sad. Right. But, we can't, professionally or personally, we can't force people to change.
No, absolutely not. But, I always say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? It's the same thing. So what do you miss anything from corporate, or?
I mean, the collaboration aspect some days, like similar to what you were saying. Yes, I miss the water cooler chat and the lunches, and even like the peer-to-peer learning in person kind of thing. Because I do a lot of facilitation on the consulting side as well. Leadership development training, things of that nature, and there is an in-person piece to all of that. Can it be done virtually? Sure. I mean, we're all doing it now, but there's a certain piece in person that you can't get virtually, and that sometimes I miss. But overall, no. I do not miss cubicle land. You know, a lot of my clients, you know, healthcare, professional services, government being down here, it tends to be cubicle land, you know, and for that, I would rather sit in the home office with the fur babies whimpering at my feet and just be able to do what I need to do, you know, kind of thing. Or even have the 3 monitors up, and I've done it with the whiteboard behind me, you know, and do training from here as well, facilitation from home office as well. So, yeah, most days I don't, which is interesting because, you know, as a strong extrovert, in case you couldn't tell, people would think, they'd be like,
people who don't know Scott's an extrovert, we'll just,
you know, although, you know, forewarning for anyone who may be looking for a leadership coach, I hold silence to the point where people are like, are you going to say something? It's weird. So time and place for everything. Right. But yeah, I mean, being a strong extrovert, it's like at home, sometimes people are like, how do you, doesn't that bother you? How do you do that? And I just said, it just means more therapy for my husband when he comes home from work at the end of the day. And I'm like, rah, rah, rah. That's pretty much what it amounts to. Yeah. That
it's
and the
so
dog
funny
looking
that
at
you
you.
say
Like,
that. It is so funny because my wife, you know, she works in a steel mill, and she, I don't know, manages supervises like, you know, 23, like more people than anybody else at the mill. But that's another story. And so by the time she gets home, you know, she just wants to be left alone. And I'm like, hi.
Exactly.
Let's play, you know. She's just like, oh my God, you know. But we were able to finally have that conversation because I'm like, you're with people all day. I'm not. And this was before all of our restrictions from COVID, you know, were lifted. Now I get out and I could do more, and I don't feel as like psychotic. But when COVID was happening, I was like this. I was like the dogs, like when you're gone all day and they're like, you know, and then that's kind of how I felt. So when you left corporate, did you just leave cold, or did you kind of start your thing on the side, and then what did you?
Yeah. I did what I now mentor people not to do. Which is, yes, I left cold. I left cold with reasons, and I left cold with something lined up, but I left cold in regards to having a business officially started, launched, pipeline, next steps, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And, you know, I was with a large professional services firm at the time, which I have nothing bad to say about, and I still do work with, but basically it was stop licking my hand. Thank you. Basically, it was one of those things.
For those listening, it's not me; it's his dog.
It's the dog. There's a dog out here.
It's the dog. It's not.
Basically, you know, it was one of those things where you know, I had just reached the point where I just knew I wasn't making an impact. I knew I wasn't able to make a difference. All the stuff we were talking about earlier, and I said, let's just try this. Let's see the grass greener other side kind of thing, and see what happens. I was lucky at the time that I actually had a couple of mentors that I could rely on, you know, some who were entrepreneurs themselves, you know, others who were leaders inside organizations, not just from a BD perspective, but from the perspective of saying, you know, if you want to work with procurement in a company like this, here's what you need to know. Here's some things you have to do, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, that was definitively helpful in that regard. I think he senses there's a dog on the other side. But, you know, I tell people now, do your research in advance. And I mean, your research on what it is you think you want to do, why you want to do what it is you think you want to do, you know, and then you can from there find the support required to help you get started in doing what it is that you want to do. Coaches, mentors, all of the professional services folks, you know, your accountants, your attorneys, all that basic stuff that we need as well. But people that understand your space. Right, marketing, but people that understand, you know, how you do what you do and why you do what you do. So yes to leaving cold. Those are some lessons learned for me. Made some pivots over the years, you know, as well, like many other folks. Some pivots were forced, you know, economically speaking. You know, other pivots were a total choice. So, you know, you just have to stay flexible. You have to stay agile. And the one thing that I've learned over the years too, been in business 14 years now, you know, is you do you is the easiest way to put it, right? So, you know, back to this whole piece, you know, authenticity piece for me, I don't just preach it or write about it. You know, it's a personal passion area of mine because it's how I try and, you know, live in my way of being. And what I mean by that is you've got to find the things that give, and I mean this professionally too, you've got to find the things that give you energy, right? You've got to find the things that give you satisfaction, that make you happy. And sometimes it's just, okay, well, I know I want to make a difference. Okay, then go about finding out how, right? But it's making the difference piece that makes you happy, and then figure out how you can support that. Other times is I want to be creative, right? Okay, fine. Then you're going to start looking at creative industries, right? But understanding why you want to do that and why it's important to you, kind of thing. And over the years, I've really started to, take the you do you philosophy in that regard. And I've adapted my service offerings to an extent over the years, just because I got tired of doing certain things, or I got burnt out doing certain things, or I didn't feel like I was making such an impact with certain things anymore. And that's another thing, that retrospectively I say to entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to make a pivot either. You are your own boss, so to speak, for a reason, right? Just give it thought, and give it planning, but don't stay stuck where you're not happy, and don't stay stuck where you're not making a difference, because if you're doing that as an entrepreneur, you should just stay in the company where you're at.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because, we talk about authenticity. And one of the things that I've been really noticing, and a lot of my guests have been talking about, is being your authentic self in your business. So finding out what you love and everything, but, being you. And I always go back to where, I was told, in a networking group to be less me. And I tried it.
That's my favorite.
I know, right? It's like, be less you. You're a little too intense. You're a little too in people's faces. And I did. I was like, oh, well, maybe it's the New York thing, and I'm in Indiana, and, whatever. So I did kind of, pull back a little bit, but then I was miserable because I couldn't be as upbeat and as me. So I really kind of felt stunted. Right. And when I got out of that group and just started, well, kind of COVID hit, right? And even though I was in the group when COVID hit, but everything was remote at that point. But I really started getting to know who I was, being isolated. I got to realize that, screw that. I mean, be less me. I'm me for a reason.
I can't even.
I get shit done when I'm
GSD. GSD is part of my motto too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my middle name. It's like Iris GSD. Goldfeder, or the Goldfeders. Anyway, but yeah, it's all about being your authentic self, and when you show up as your authentic self, you attract the right clients, right? You attract the right people to work with. And I think that that's huge. And so for entrepreneurs, or, people thinking about being entrepreneurs, that's just huge. Be you, because when you're you attract the right people.
100%. I mean, that,
as you know.
Yeah. And that's, it's a chapter in the book, right? Which is, all about authenticity, how to access your authenticity to be you and bring you. It's chapter 27 in The Successful Spirit, which is on Amazon. Shameless plug. But
not shameless plug.
That's the whole humble brag. How's that? That's the whole, basic model from my perspective, which is first you have to take a look at how do I access my authenticity, right? Then you can start to actually live it. And sometimes people will say, as the person who said to you, be a little less whatever, be a little less this, a little less that. Those traits, whatever they observed, were aspects of your authenticity according to them. They may not have been according to you, right? But figuring out not just the who we want to be, but the how we want that to come across is also important in regards to authenticity. And it takes a lot of reflection, and it takes a lot of mirroring, and testing out with a select group of trusted folks who you feel comfortable with as well, and the ability to, take feedback, and say, oh, wait, I was trying to accomplish this. I was trying to bring across these parts of who I am. Oh, okay. So it came off this way instead. Okay. So let me course correct a little bit, because that wasn't my intent. Right. So, authenticity is a journey. It's not a sprint. But to your point, yes, it is extremely, extremely important. And I'm fixated on that networking group. I would have walked out if they had said that to me. But you do it organizationally too, right?
And when
and that's the thing. You have to know who you are authentically and how you want that to be represented, and then you have to find a match, right?
The guy
and if you don't,
who told me that was my coach.
See, there you go. Yeah.
So I'm just throwing that out. But
and if you can't find a match, that's why we do what we do. We create a match.
Yes.
We create a fit.
100%. I think the other thing too is you're right. You need to be able to hear feedback. Now, if it was like, instead of be less you, because what the hell is that even, right?
We define that. Thanks. Yeah.
Right. If it was you maybe try X, Y, and Z, then I could have maybe digested that a little bit better rather than, the way that it was told. Because, I got home and, I told my wife, I was like, I was told to be less me today. How do I even do that? Like, how do I, and she was, because she's all about coaching her, guys and everything. And they are all guys, which is why I'm saying guys.
Surprise.
But, she was like, what were the specifics? I said 0 specific. I didn't mean to do that. I hate that. It was 0 specifics. So I didn't even know what to work on. But like I said, as I was isolated, I got to see certain things. Like I really got to know myself. It was pretty amazing, the conversations I had with myself for that year and a half. It was like, girl, what are you doing? And then, my amazing LinkedIn community that, I got connected to, and you met Nina and everything. I made these like lifelong friends who got me and who appreciated me for who I was. I didn't have to change anything, and
saying hi again,
baby. And it was,
that's authenticity. I'm not going to hide the dog, but he doesn't.
No, don't hide the dog.
Go lay down. Go lay down.
Skylar's just like laying on the couch going, I want to go out, but she knows.
Yes, I wish this one would.
She can't go. She can't go out. But yeah, so I was able to kind of look at that. And Kofi, who's our producer, will sometimes be like, Iris, relax. Because I get stressed about things that I probably don't need to be stressed about.
But wait, that's mindfulness, right?
It is mindfulness. And my mindfulness, right?
Yep.
I give something 90 seconds, unless maybe it garners a little bit more time than that, but I control it.
I think that's important. That's why I'm joking aside, but I think that's why I interrupted with that. I think that's important because that's part of authenticity too, right? We know what triggers us. We have to identify what triggers us, figure out why it actually triggers us. Then we can try and avoid those situations, people, or interactions. However, when we are triggered, right, we have that awareness, then we go, okay, now we need to do our mindfulness, or now we need to take our deep breaths or our step away or whatever it is for each of us. And that is a whole mindset and self-care thing, but taking the time to actually realize I am triggered now and here's why. A lot of people don't even get that far. And then you continue on the hamster wheel. Right.
And I found out, it was so interesting. I was working with somebody who wasn't a therapist, but was kind of coaching me anyway. Anyway, it made me realize why I had certain behaviors, and it was from my 7-year-old self, like the way that I dealt with my 7-year-old, or the way my 7-year-old self dealt with something. And
it's a very positive intelligence thing. Visualization to childhood is a very PQ thing.
I'm telling you, man, and you can explain what that means after, but it was this whole, holy crap, that's why I've been dealing with it, because the 7-year-old dealt with it, and here I am, years later. It was interesting, but it made everything in my life make sense. Like I look back at everything that I'd ever done and went, that's
now I get it.
Now I get it. And so, but it was amazing because now when I run my business, when I do this, when I have my relationships, it's with a whole different mindset. It's coming from a whole different place. And it's been pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, kudos for putting in the work. No sarcasm intended. But because a lot of people don't even, get that far. But it is funny not funny, but interesting and positive, when, you get that aha, or when I'm coaching client, and a client gets their aha. And sometimes their aha dates back 10 years to workplace trauma that happened 10 years ago. Other times their aha dates back to something their mother said or did when they were 7 years old, and they carried it with them all these years. And now it manifests, when they are in a leadership role within an organization, So, and I have a mother who is a retired educator and a therapist. So, for me, it's like, if I had to hear about foo issues one more time, FOO, family of origin issues, right, one more time, I'm like, okay. Like my neurodivergence, my ADD, I was diagnosed in the 80s as well, so that was part of who I am all the way. I mean, it still is, but all the way back then, but over the years, I realized because of the neurodivergence, because of the ADD, and there were other associated learning disabilities with that I would get triggered by certain things in certain ways as well, right? And I had to say, okay, as I got older, I realized that that's what it was equated to. That square peg, round hole, we're going to single you out kind of thing. Oh, you have to do it differently, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, now that I'm aware of those situations and I'm aware of where it comes from, I just manage me differently.
Right.
But I couldn't manage me differently if I didn't have the awareness to begin with. So thanks, Mom, for that. But, it is putting in the effort. It is putting in the work. And yes, sometimes it does go back to when we're 7.
Yes. Now, explain to everybody what PQ is.
Oh, I'm sorry. So PQ is positive intelligence, which is a body of work that a lot of coaches use. A lot of different folks use it as well, but the easiest way to explain it is it's kind of a combination of personal mindfulness exercises and just ways to change and shift your perspective about how you view you in certain situations and how you view your interactions with others in certain situations. That's a nutshell. The book, I think, Positive Intelligence, I think Shahzad Kamin wrote, I want to say 2012. But the program is still going on right now as well. And I did the 7-week one. And one of the things I realized in that program is a really good app. The app is really good. And you do 2-minute, 5-minute, or 12-minute, I think are the increments, bursts of mindfulness exercises. And it's usually a combination of auditory, visual, or tactile. Because neurologically speaking, if your brain is in a cycle of any kind, where you're spinning over something, one of those 3 things is going to snap you out of it because your brain can't focus on both at the same time.
Wow.
So does it rub the 2 fingers together? One, for example, tactile, auditory, hear far away, then hear close up sounds. So you're just focusing on other things. And personally, when I went through it, I had found it very interesting and very valuable in my relationships interactions on the personal side, because I don't want to go into the whole thing, but I have to address the big piece of the body of work. He has this thing, you're a sage or a saboteur, and you view yourself, in your interactions, through sage and saboteur mindset. So the intent of the body of work really is to shift your overall perspective. They should give me a plug for this. Is to shift your overall perspective from being less of a saboteur personally in your interactions and going down that route, and more of a sage. That's the nutshell. So the visualization piece is a big component of that. And one of the things he does is he has an exercise where, it takes you back in time, so to speak, when you were a child, and you visualize your happy self, when you didn't have anything to worry about and you were all carefree, and childhood happy picture and all this other stuff. There's also other visualizations to more traumatic moments, to help you uncover that. So if you get triggered now, like we were just talking about, right? Right. You know where it's coming from, kind of thing. Yeah. So I incorporate pieces of it into my work, but I have colleagues that use it, as the full body of work, and run peers through, PQ pods, and, have coaching just around positive intelligence as well. So, yeah, that's what that was.
So, I've been working with my mindfulness coach for like 2 years now.
And you haven't thrown an iPhone since?
And I'm going to give her, well, I haven't thrown an iPhone since. I know that. Okay, well, we didn't talk about that before, but we can. But I'm going to give her a shameless plug. Diane Titterton, A Time to Flourish, UK. Amazing. She's just phenomenal. And the iPhone thing came from, we were in the middle of COVID. It was like June, and we decided to sell our house. Well, okay, I decided to sell our house because it was a little smaller than what we're in now, and I did not want to. I didn't know how long I was going to be stuck in that house, working from home. And it was small. Our backyard faced not a major road, but major enough where people were walking by, throwing shit in our yard. I didn't want our dogs to get hurt. There was like a lot of reasons. So we decided, okay, we're going to sell the house. So I, spoke to my realtor, and she was like, okay, let's talk about it. I'm like, okay. 2 days later, I look on realtor.com and find our house. And I'm like, oh crap. And it was, I called Heather up. I'm like, oh my God, I found our house. She's like, I need to look at it. I'm like, I know, but I'm going to go look at it and, whatever. So I went, I looked, and we decided to put an offer in 3 days later. So from the time I sat with my realtor to the time we were like, okay, we're going to buy the house, it was 3 days. And we put an offer in and they took it. Squirrel. Well, yeah. And then the worst part, and no offense to relocation companies, the one that we had to deal with was a freaking nightmare. But then it was like, okay, you have to get your house ready in a week to put on the market. And we're like, oh my God. So it was like this whole thing. And then, so, we got everything done, our house, put it on the market. It was on the market one day. We had 12 viewings. We sold it that night. I mean, it was insane. The market was nuts. So this was like in 2020.
Now it's changing. My friends who are agents are not thrilled right now, but yeah.
Oh, is it? Yeah. So, but, and then we were having all these issues with the relocation company. And every time we think something's going to be going, it can. And then this was changing. And so between COVID, being stuck in the house, stressed that, I would be using whatever Instacart and having to clean everything before I brought it in the house because I was like insane about it. I have
Lysol on the porch. I get it.
Oh my God. It was like so stressed. Then it was like this one, I got a call from my realtor and I was like, oh no, actually that's not what it was. It was, I'm not going to say their name, but it was a certain, communications company, TV provider. Let's put it that way. And I was like, I am done. And I took my phone and Heather was standing behind me and she saw my arm go back and she thought I was just going to put my arm back down, but I threw it and I didn't throw it like across the room. I threw it down. I was just like, God, boom, down. And, I am going to give a plug for these guys because life-proof cases are like the best. What happened was it didn't crack the screen. It busted the inside. So there was like that little black stuff. And I was like, oh.
But don't you miss the days they had, I used to have in my office, this pop art picture. I got it at IKEA years ago, but of a woman slamming the phone. Boom. The giant red phone,
Yes.
or whatever phone, a rotary phone. And I realized, I was like, somebody said to me one day, they were like, oh, you used to be able to do that? And I'm like, tell me you're kidding.
Right.
But there are 2 generations now, 2.5 really, that don't know what it's like to be able to slam down a phone when you're pissed off.
I know.
Because that's exactly what happens
right?
when you crack the screen, right?
Yeah.
Even when we had flip phones, cellular flip phones, at least you could just be like,
and those were like, oh my God. I mean, I can throw those. I remember back in the day, I had like the flip Motorola thing where the screen was like on the front, but you had a case on it that was like, I don't know, like this thing, this plastic thing was like completely covered.
Oh yeah.
My AirPods. And that you could throw and it wouldn't, whatever.
They don't even know. They don't even know what it's like these days. That's actually, it is an exercise that sometimes comes up when I do my generational diversity workshops as well. Because some of the boomers like it, they'll imitate. And I have props, sometimes for the workshops. And one of them, I have one of those old hollowed out child phones, but you could slam it down with the hook kind of thing. Yeah. It's like, how many don't even know what this means, as an expression of frustration kind of thing. Yeah. So that was just funny.
Boom.
Yeah. That's another thing from an entrepreneur perspective, though. Yeah, don't break your client's equipment.
Don't break your client's equipment. No. And it's not easy. It's like, part of this podcast is to also talk about where it gets messy. And there's times when, because I became entrepreneur out of necessity, there's times where it's scary as shit. You don't know where your next, dollar's coming from. You don't know where your next. So it's not all
sunshine and roses.
Sunshine and roses, or rainbows and unicorn is my
right. Rainbows and unicorns.
Well, we're getting to Pride Month, so but it's not.
Oh my God, it's almost June. That's right. Where is this? True. Time is flying by.
It's nuts. So we have like Mental Health Month in May, and then Pride Month in June, and
API now.
Yeah. But speaking of all that, let's go into the DEI initiative, right? Because that was a good kind of segue. For people who don't know, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's been big with companies too now, right? Like they're starting to adopt. One of the companies that I'm working with now is adopting the diversity, the DEI. And it was funny because they were working on this program, and one of the pictures that they had, my client called me up and said, "Hey, can you help me with this project?" And I said, "Yeah." And I've talked about this before, and it was a little, white girl going, this.
God, I hate that in stock imagery.
Which is so,
think about it.
It's so innocent, right? It used to be, what did this used to be? This used to be the okay sign or whatever. And now
that's a double, right? Because now you're looking at the symbolism of the sign, but you're also looking at the fact that, white privilege or obliviousness, just a white woman.
That's exactly.
You got two things now from a diversity perspective,
which is crazy when it comes to that. And I told her, I was like, "Ooh, you can't use that." She's like, "Why?" And I sent her the Google link. We were on the phone. I said, "Go look at the link I sent you." And she was like, "Oh my God." I said, "Yeah, that's why you need somebody who gets it. I know I'm white, and I hate the word woke. I'm just aware. That woke crap. I'm aware."
Right, aware, yes.
Because it matters to me. I mean, this matters to me. And it's not, just for the LGBTQ, it's for Black lives, it's for Asian, it's for any, wherever the hatred is pointed towards right now, that's where, I'm at. And they really, really get it. And anyway, so she was like, "Oh my God, we have these billboards everywhere, but thank God they were electronic billboards." So
they could change them.
Could you imagine? I would have been like,
but see, that's just interesting though, right? Because I do the DEI work, or the DEI A and B, the A and B access and belonging. But the fact that she recognized that, and she was willing to address that, and she wasn't like either "we don't care" or "oh shit," kind of thing.
Right.
That says a lot too, because, there are many who are just blind to it. And there are many who know about this DEI thing, this diversity thing, but whatever. Right. So, kudos in that regard.
No, they're really adopting it. And actually, Kofi, my producer, and I are probably going to be helping them with a video or a series of videos, addressing it.
We'll chat.
Because it's, But
this week, you do bring it up at a very interesting time, right? Let's take a moment to pause and reflect within the last couple of weeks in regards to diversity and hate, what has happened. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, you and I have talked about this offline already. I get as annoyed and upset about it as you do. But it's like between what happened in Buffalo and then what happened, at the church, the Taiwanese church, it's
going to make me cry.
And you lose words because I don't want to use certain words in this recording that I don't want out there for posterity, even though it's because I'm angry about it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But organizations are realizing, particularly with things like this on the rise, across the country, organizations are realizing, first of all, these types of diverse individuals exist within my workplace, number one, right? And that needs to be acknowledged, and they need to be supported. Right. And not to say organizations didn't care about diversity before. Some did. But, the reality of where we're at now, even within all of this hate and discourse, there is a positive in certain regards. And one of that I've seen is from the organizational standpoint, the workplace standpoint, where they're starting to address it, but they're starting to address it actually at the people level, right? So there's mental health guidance and support for folks that are impacted. It's not just go here, have an ERG meeting, kind of thing. It also is causing leadership to reflect on their own leadership practices. Am I, inclusive enough in my own leadership practices overall? What are my blind spots? Where's my unconscious bias?
You use the acronyms.
Oh, I'm sorry. Enterprise resource groups, affinity groups. So and that unconscious bias is coming to light. So, you know, even though things like this are going on in the country right now, and of course you do have a segment of society that doesn't care, let's own it. We are not that segment of society. But overall, organizations are starting to give it more focus. And do I call bullshit on the fact that the ones that did not before are doing it now? Yeah, I do. But look, they are,
I think at least now they're recognizing it and taking the steps. I think that's, right. You have to give them, because honestly, before, as much as everything has been in the news, and we're not going to get into everything we know about Buffalo, and we know about the Taiwanese, church, recently. But how much, that's this week, how much has happened in the past 5 years? I mean, it's just, and I think that it's a culmination of people realizing that, and this affects people's mental health. Like somebody in our pod has been affected because, people near her, right, were
it's always 6 degrees of separation too, as well. Yeah.
Oh my God, absolutely. And it's always the diverse. It's this guy had the most abhorrent word written on his rifle, and then I struggle because I have 3 strikes against me, right? I'm white, and I'm white. I'm a woman. I'm Jewish, and I'm gay. You have 2. You're a man and you're Jewish, and
technically 3.
You're gay and you're Jewish, and
so that's 3 or 4. It becomes white, gay, male, Jewish, technically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the white part gives us the privilege, and it's even for me as a woman, even though I'm a woman, people don't look at me and assume that I'm
let me
gay,
pause.
right?
Can I pause you for a diversity story from a colleague of mine? Totally relates to what you just said. I think
yes, absolutely.
It's been an impactful story for me since I first heard it about 10 years ago. So back in graduate school, a friend of mine, I'm still friendly with, work with, Black female. So we were in our diversity course, and it's cohort format, so it's all peer-to-peer learning. And we're all sitting around and talking about diversity and sharing impacts from our viewpoints. And so she said, well, one of the older white men in my cohort, made a comment, and it was just a racially blind comment, basically. So white privilege comment. So she speaks up and she says, look, she said, the bottom line is, she said, when you walk into a room, she said, people are just going to see a white man and all the privilege that comes with it. She looks at me jokingly. She goes, yes, even to the gays out there, kind of thing. Because what they'll say is a white man and all the privilege that comes with it. She said, when I walk into a room, she goes, before I even open my mouth, she says, the first thing that most people see is a big Black woman. And what do they associate with a big Black woman? That she's going to be a big, loud Black woman, right? And she says, that's what they see. And that's the stereotype they form in their mind before I even open my mouth.
Right.
So, and that story sticks with me too, particularly from a diversity perspective, because to your point about privilege, I think that is a huge piece of it as well, right? And many of us who are privileged have to have the awareness that, number one, yes, we are. And number two, how can we leverage that privilege to help support our friends, peers, family, colleagues who are not as privileged?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I bring my producer, Kofi, up. Kofi's a friend of mine. I mean, he produces this and he does my web stuff. He's phenomenal. He's a greatly talented guy. And he and I are going to, at the end of this season, we're going to sit down and do one of these and kind of go over the season. And you guys will get to meet him. He's just such an amazing guy. But we had a conversation once, and it was just a really highly emotional day. And he said, well, you're gay, people, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but they don't see that when they look at me. Right. When you wake up in the morning, you wake up Black.
Yep.
You can't hide that.
And that was her point. That was my friend's point. Exactly.
Right. Now they don't, when they look at him, they don't see a big, loud woman. They see, a Black guy that, got into my car and we got pulled over before I even drove away because, and the stigma that's attached to that. And the fact that, companies, they talk the talk, but are you going to walk the walk? Right, are you going to, promote these, Black individuals and give them the right amount of money, that, you know, the same amount of money that their white
Equity is another
counterparts are
piece,
making.
right?
That's where
Equity is huge.
that's, yep. So it's all, it's all part of it. But I think that the people or the companies that are, and the people that are, you know, talking the talk and walking the walk, those are the different, you know, those are the change makers. I really believe
There's a big difference, and I find it. I mean, there's a big difference between what I call lip service companies or lip service leaders, you know, and those leaders who actually really care to make an impact. One of my clients right now, a large utility client, I'm actually, you know, very impressed with the release that was sent out to, I don't know if it's sent externally, but to internal employees and contractors this past week with everything that happened. And, you know, you could tell it was not just a standard corporate comm that was written on behalf of somebody else, right? You know, this CEO actually put himself and his authenticity into it and wrote it. But one of the things, you know, that was in there was basically to the whole, you know, employee base was those of us that are in a place of privilege. You know, we have to leverage that place of privilege. Like I was saying, we have to leverage that place of privilege to be able to support those that are not. And the organization is actually supporting those individuals in various ways to be able to do exactly that.
right.
Whereas other organizations, for corporate citizenship purposes, it's like, let me check the box off, right? But it's like, they don't really care, you know? And then there are some that mean well, but then you just get into bureaucratic minutia, unfortunately.
Right. And, you know, and that they can't control. So,
right.
But excuse me, that goes back to company culture, right?
Right. There you go. We're on the same page. So I was going to say, from a workplace perspective around culture, right? You know, one of the things about DEI, A, and B is there are fundamentals, right? So everybody wants to feel valued, heard, appreciated, and recognized, right? But when you get into safety, psychological safety, you know, and you get into trust, those things are different for various diverse groups, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, if you really want an employee to have a positive employee experience within your organization, then that includes recognizing them as a whole individual for who they are and supporting them as that whole individual, you know, and who they are, the authenticity piece, right? Not just saying, you know, you work here, so let me support you within the context of, you know, the workplace and your role and what that means, kind of thing. So, you know, taking it a little bit deeper in that regard, you know, that speaks volumes to organizations who have cultures that value DEI and diverse individuals versus those that, you know, will just kind of check off a little box. You've got to have psychological safety and you've got to have trust.
Right. I'm at 100%. And especially, you know, in like with what happened now, you know, the Black employees may need a day off to once again have to, you know, ruminate or absorb what the hell just happened. You know, the
mental health day.
Employee, yeah, exactly, a mental health day. It's just it's so maddening at this point that all the hate.
That's like the deep breath one. That's it's just,
that's the mindfulness. Like,
that's my PQ moment, right?
Yeah.
But because it becomes very overwhelming. It becomes very overwhelming. And, you know, when dealing with it professionally, but also dealing with it emotionally, personally speaking as well, and I'm not just speaking for me who does some DEI work, but, you know, those that are mired in both every day,
right?
You know, we've got to pay attention to that too, right?
Oh,
because
absolutely.
That's doubly as exhausting, you know, and doubly taxing on mental health.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I really hope that, you know, the more that companies move towards DEI initiatives and they actually, you know, walk that, hopefully we see change. And it may not be in our lifetimes, but maybe.
Plant the seeds. That's what I say. You know, people say, what are you going to do? You know, kind of thing, you know, or use your voice or speak up. Well, I do. I mean, personally, of course, too, but within the context of my work, I do as well. You know, some of the leaders that I'm coaching, minority leaders, you know, and other leaders that I'm coaching, not minority leaders, but are very concerned for, you know, minorities, you know, those diverse communities within the organization, and personally are trying to figure out, you know, I care for these people personally, so how do I manage that and deal with that within the context of a work environment? And at the same time, what can I do with my leadership hat on and influence around here within the context of workplace culture to support these individuals as well?
Right. And you'll have to come back and we'll have to do a whole conversation because we could talk about this for hours. But so getting back to the context of the podcast.
Yes.
So, why should somebody use you as opposed to one of your competitors? Like, what makes working with you? What's your differentiator? What makes you so special?
Yeah. So, as to not brag, I go by what my clients have said to me, which
this is your time to brag. So brag.
then I'll brag from the perspective of client feedback, right? Which is, I am a boat rocker, a system viewer, a workplace therapist. I bring levity to, stressful situations at times, but I yet remain empathetic and direct and understanding in regards to not being prescriptive to my clients per se in what they should do, but spending the time to get to know them as well as their business and understanding, what it is they may really need, and then co-developing any solutions with them. And that overall, and the maintaining of the focus on people, right? I mean, for me, it's about the people, period. That's the employee experience piece. Like, I'll use technology as an example. So companies spend a shit ton of money on technology, right? Well, that's great. Whoop-de-doo, right? But if your people do not adapt and adopt to that technology, then it's just wasted time, effort, and money in ROI tanks, right? So you've got to maintain that focus on people within the organization. And then, from the coaching side, it's building good leaders, so to speak, and guiding good leaders to become even better leaders as well. So people focus. Yep.
I love that. That's so awesome. Well, I'm thrilled that you were able to join me today.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. It was good conversation. I don't think we went squirrel too much. Maybe dog a little bit.
We didn't. The dogs made us go squirrel, but we didn't. But it's just so interesting because like I want Karen on here, I want Michelle on here. I'm just putting this out there into the ether because I think you guys will be similar but different, right? And when it comes to the coaching aspect, people, I don't think, look at coaches the way coaching really is. I think like a coach, when people think of it, kind of think of it in an old hat version rather than the new version. And I think that, you bring this.
New version?
Uh-huh.
What's the new version?
The new version is being, well, I don't know. The way that I was coached, obviously, be less you, was focused more on, I think, how people perceive me rather than how to better myself. And what you guys are doing are, self-awareness, care, the betterment of, a leader, the betterment of an individual and how they can, grow. So that's where I see the difference. And that might have been just my experience, but I think what you do is pretty fantastic. And then the last question that I always ask everybody is, what's the one thing that lights your fire? Like what lights you up and gets you really, what are you passionate about?
Cutting through the bullshit. I mean, seriously, because, whatever that looks like in context, but cutting through the BS, right? I mean, you can't, at an individual level, you cannot achieve growth. You cannot achieve improvement and betterment for yourself and for others if you're going to sit there and you're going to tell yourself a bullshit story all over again, right? And spin and spin and spin. So you've got to be able to acknowledge and cut through the BS and take some accountability. And then at the organizational level, it's similar, right? To cut through the BS at an organizational level is important to me as well, because you've got to get down to the people level of things, back to my people focus, right? And you've got to be able to get down to root causes. I do not do Band-Aid work. I do not. Right. That was one of the things to your very first question as to why I started my own business. I don't believe in just Band-Aids. Figure out what the long-term solution is to resolve the pain.
Good. Excellent. Well,
and the dogs, obviously, in a person.
And the dogs, obviously. I have one who's like chewing at my hand because she's like, I want to go out. Right. Yeah. You have 2 minutes before I end this. But again, thank you so much. And I want you back. You have to come back on. And
we'll have another discussion. Maybe we'll do a group discussion around the DEI. That could be cool.
Yeah, maybe we could do that.
DEI for small business
listening in the background going, okay, how do we do this? But we'll figure it out. We'll have like a little thing going on. But I think that super important. And I'm starting to wonder if there should be like an offshoot of this that's more tackling the social issues as opposed to the professional piece. So that's something that we're talking about as well.
Cool. Or how you could link those too, and how do you tackle them as an entrepreneur, as a
Yes.
small business, or as a large business as a leader, but either way,
Meet my co-host, folks. But anyway,
the extrovert, right? Yeah.
Yes, the extrovert. Because I've had like 2 introverts on, which is like hilarious. It's like a whole different.
You're like pulling. Yeah. I've done those.
But well, thank you again for being on, and everybody. I want to thank you guys for tuning in again. I know these are long, but to me they go by in a flash. I hope they go by in a flash for you as well. But Skylar's making me sign off right now, so I'm going to sign off. Iris Goldfeder, and thanks for joining us. And go out and find what lights your fire. Take care, everyone.